In the beginning of the second movement of the second sonata by Rachmaninov, we have many different harmonies that represent different characters. We start with a minor ninth, dominant, which means a lot of tension. Then it resolves to A minor first inversion, which is completely unexpected from a harmonical point of view, but also really sad because of the inversion. I would be careful to then play the A as a syncopation, as it's written, because it lasts a while, and then this helps the melody go on and the direction to be kept to prepare the B that is after. Then there is the same pattern. We have tension and then release, but this time with two completely different harmonies. First of all, the seventh that we have in the third bar is very different from the dominant seventh. It's a third species, so it has a different kind of tension. It's more of a transition and more mysterious in a way, and less classically tense. And this resolves to C major, which is by definition one of the brightest chords and keys there are. So this is very different already from before, and it seems as if this diminuendo doesn't want to really resolve. And added to this, there is also the next bar, which is A major. So here things are starting to get dark, because from C major that has no key signature, A major has three added sharps, so it results a lot darker. And in these two bars, I would be careful and listen to the inner voices rather than the melody, because the melody has a lot of syncopation, and I think it's very easy to get lost in rallentando and lose the direction of the phrase. Whereas if we focus on the middle chromaticism, going forward might be a lot easier. And for the last two bars, they are very religious, very peaceful. And for this, I would first of all enhance the sixth of the right hand, like Brahms did many times. So the top and the bottom voice. And clearly the bass is very important, especially the second chord, because it is religious, because it's a 1-4-1, a plagal cadence, but a bit strange, because the second chord not only is in first inversion, but it also has an added sixth that darkens even more this harmony. Looking at the main theme, first of all, I think it's important to note that it's written lento. And I think it's often played quite fast for some reason, probably because it's a dance, but I would really focus on the fact that it's a slow dance for Rachmaninov. And second of all, I think the chords, once again, play a prominent role in saying to us which functions do the harmonies have. There's always some kind of uncertainty and some kind of appoggiatura in all of the downbeats. So I think that might be taken in consideration to create an even darker sound and this atmosphere of not really knowing where we're going. For example, the first chord is, this is the first downbeat that clearly wants to go to the E. Then we have the same thing, but with an E that wants to go to a D. And then a double appoggiatura even, so the tension is increasing because these two notes want to resolve. And this is to prepare the biggest amount of tension until now, which is this chord, which is completely dissonant and allows us to then resolve to the dominant. So taking in consideration all of this, we can understand that the tension is increasing from a harmonic point of view, but at the same time, there's clearly a diminuendo going on, because the music is going down in terms of register, and it's getting darker and darker. So I think it's very important to make these two contrasting things coexist with the sound, and especially with a lot of sense of direction that even in the long notes is prolonged by a feeling of tension that applies especially in the left hand, that has these very long notes, the E until the D comes, there's not really such a relaxation going on. The tension is still going on, so it's basically one beat every bar that counts the most. One other important thing that I think is not often really considered is that to make this dance really gloomy and dark, which I think it is, and also clearly very romantic, I think it's important to make the downbeat clearly in tempo. So it's often played each beginning of the bar because of the arpeggio of the right hand, like this. So a bit something in the middle with where the left hand plays at some point of the right hand, or even at the beginning before the right hand even starts. But I think this gets out of the way the main thing, which is the rhythm of the left that does. Why should we have it just here? I think it's very important to have it all the way from the beginning. It's a bit harder in terms of controlling of the sound because these two notes, and also apply to the next bars, so these two and these two at the beginning of each bar should be very, very quiet. Otherwise the arpeggio sounds too much, and this is still piano as a dynamic. But overall, I think with the right balance and help of the left pedal, I think this is doable. And when the tension increases, especially in the ending bit, before the phrase begins again, I think a trick is to feel the body that starts from a lower place and then it lifts towards the end, especially in this very last chord, so that we have an appoggiatura that is very dissonant, that resolves to this. So like a normal appoggiatura where we would do down, up, I would solve this the same exact way, feeling that the body is actually lifting a bit, so that this feels just like the ending of a discourse. Otherwise this dominant, I think, acquires too much importance in the overall rhythmical pace. And going up in the last bar of tension, Rachmaninov puts dashes every single note of the melody, which means clearly increase even more the tension. But also I would kind of change the pedal really slowly so that a bit of the arpeggio and the harmony stays until the end, and this chord only results clear after a tiny bit that is played, so that it's not so clear the transition between these harmonies, and this can be just one thing, this part. For the first variation of the theme, I think we can kind of go a little bit forward in terms of tempo to really make the feeling of the dance a bit more felt, because it's very accentuated by the fact that there are a lot of slurs, so notes that are connected in twos, and it is very important to make the difference between these slurs and the very end of each bar very important, because in the slur clearly we have to prioritize the first out of the two notes, whereas at the end of each bar the slur isn't there, so we understand that once again we need the downbeat of each bar at the beginning. Up until now, all the phrases we had resolved in nothing, they dissolved. And this first variation and its ending is no exception. It's just that the tension and the polyphony is much more, but this is proportionate to the distance of the place that we're going to, because the place that we're going to is going to be in a completely different character, in G major, which is the relative major of the main key, and this tension has to dissolve very slowly and has a very particular turning point, which is after this 7th/9th. When we have the dominant of G major, then that is the turning point where I think the sound should completely change and lose a lot of the gravity. When I talk about gravity and the gravitational pull of each phrase, I think it's very important that I clarify that it's never something that has to do with the fingers themselves that have always a grip on the keyboard. It's more an arms and shoulders thing, and overall just a feeling, a sense of direction that goes in a different way than normal. So let's analyze this last bar of tension before the G major section. We have a first chord that we already heard, this usual very tense chord, followed by the same dominant as before, by the 7th. And then we have the pivotal chord, I think, that is this very important 9th coming from a third species 7th. That also, I think, sounds as a turning point. It's not really tense, nor really resolving something. It's sort of like a question, but very mysterious question that brings us to the actual cadence, to G major, which is done by the usual 5-1 on D and then G. And then resolves. So in terms of sound, we need to really differentiate these harmonies in a way that makes us feel all of them very clearly without stopping the tension, but for that the melody is really great because it never really stops. And I think that towards the end of this bar, it's not really essential that the pedal is 100% clean. Also because of this arpeggio that needs to be connected clearly to the melody, but also the right hand needs to be legato before. So we can't really change too much the pedal, but we need to make something in the middle because we can't keep the same exact pedal between the dominant and the tonic. So something in the middle where I kind of vibrate and I prioritize the G major chord as the arrival. Let's summarize the melody. It goes like this. So already here, so I think it's very useful to summarize the melody. So we have the first part, which stays a bit the same. Once again, 1-4-1, so very peaceful, nothing's really happening. This note always should sound brighter than the rest, because it repeats a lot of times, and it's sort of like a distant bell, or a reflection in the sea, or in some river. Then the melody goes on, and it goes to minor, so minor. So I think it's worth going a bit less in terms of dynamics. Then we have the same exact harmonies in the next change of melody, but I think there's a mixture of two things going on. The melody feels quite insisting to me, so a bit more dramatic, but then this arpeggio that has 5 notes before the actual chord, I think it makes it even darker. So I would play with this contrast in a way. So two things in one. I would play with this coexistence of two different things by playing a bit more tense and this quieter than before. Even if this opening of harmony brings us hope compared to the sadness that was there until now, I wouldn't necessarily indulge too much in doing crescendo or opening up in terms of dynamics, because still he writes piano, and actually this is the section that will go to pianissimo, which is the quietest place that he writes up until this place. And in these two bars of D major, I think it's very important to keep the tension until the very end, so until the pianissimo. And there are a lot of signs of that, so a lot of repetition that can help us feel like somebody is pulling us towards the pianissimo. So this is one discourse, and then we have these sort of resounding bells from afar. All of this is also facilitated in a way by the quavers that never stop. For once we have a very, very clear pattern and the rhythm that never stops until the pianissimo. I think the most beautiful thing about these last two bars in D major is to enjoy the two voices, one in the right and one in the left hand, that are other reflections on this huge C, and they are kind of hidden, so it's a bit difficult within the pianissimo to make them sound, but especially the one in the right hand I think gives a lot to the character of these last two bars. There's also a phrase going on between these bars, so at the very end, in the last bar, I would change not only the fingers but the pedal very slowly in order for the right hand to take the F sharp that is supposed to last 3 beats. So, while it's sounding again with the pedal, I take it silently, and the left hand can play the thumb, and this creates the full D major chord that the pedal can hold for a bit more.